The wagon lurched to a stop, and Clara knew her nightmare was about to begin. Through the torn canvas cover, she glimpsed a ramshackle cabin, squatting beneath gray Nebraska sky like a wounded animal. This was supposed to be her new home, the fresh start she'd paid for with her mother's inheritance and 3 months of terrified hope. Her mail-order husband stumbled from the cabin door, already drunk though the sun hadn't reached midday. Henry Morrison looked nothing like the photograph he'd sent, older, meaner, with cruel eyes that stripped her bare before she'd even climbed down from the wagon. "Well, looky here," he slurred, grabbing her arm as she stepped to the ground. My little investment finally arrived. His fingers left bruises through her sleeve. "Hope you're worth what I paid that marriage broker." Clara's stomach lurched. "Sir, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I paid the broker myself to—" His hand cracked across her face so hard her ears rang. "Don't you ever correct me, woman. I bought you fair and square." The wagon driver shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. Henry dragged Clara toward the cabin, her protests falling on deaf ears. Inside, the smell of rot and whiskey made her gag. Dirty dishes covered every surface. The single bed looked like it hadn't seen clean sheets in months. "Strip down," Henry commanded, already fumbling with his belt. "Time to see what I paid for." "Please," Clara whispered, backing toward the door. "I need time." Henry laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I've waited 3 months for a woman. You'll do your duty right now." He lunged for her dress, and Clara bolted. She burst through the door and ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, Henry's cursing faded as she reached the prairie grass that stretched endlessly in every direction. She had no destination, only desperate need to escape. The cold October wind cut through her thin dress, but she kept running until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. Darkness swallowed the landscape before she found shelter beside a frozen creek. Clara huddled against a fallen log, pulling her shawl tight. She'd traveled 1,000 miles to escape one nightmare only to find a worse one waiting. Now she would die alone on the prairie, and perhaps that was better than the alternative. As dawn painted the sky pale gold, the sound of approaching horses made her freeze. 3 Lakota warriors emerged from the morning mist, their faces painted and serious. Clara closed her eyes and waited for death. Instead, she heard a man's voice, low and concerned. When she looked up, the largest warrior, clearly their leader, had dismounted and knelt several feet away. His dark eyes held only compassion as he spoke in careful English. "You are hurt," he said simply. "We will help." Clara tried to speak, but only sobbed. The chief, for that's what he had to be, slowly reached out his hand, palm up, like coaxing a frightened animal. When she didn't pull away, he gently lifted her from the frozen ground. "I am Mato," he said as he carried her to his horse. "You are safe now." Something in his tone made her believe it might be true. Clara flinched awake, expecting another blow, but found only warm furs and worried dark eyes watching her from across a small fire. The lodge around her smelled of sage and wood smoke, nothing like the rot and whiskey of Henry's cabin. Chief Mato sat perfectly still, giving her space to remember where she was. "Your fever broke in the night," he said quietly, his English careful and precise. "This is good." An elderly Lakota woman entered, carrying a bowl that steamed with rich broth. She smiled kindly at Clara, her weathered face gentle. Mato gestured toward her with obvious respect. "This is Winona, my grandmother. She has been caring for you." Winona set the bowl down within Clara's reach, but didn't come closer. She spoke in Lakota, and Mato translated. "She says you have been calling out in your sleep. Bad dreams of angry man." Clara's hand flew to her cheek where Henry had struck her. The bruise felt tender under her fingertips. "I'm sorry if I disturbed anyone." "No," Mato said firmly. "You apologize for nothing. You were hurt and afraid. This is not thing to be sorry for." He stood and moved toward the lodge entrance. Clara tensed, waiting for demands, for expectations, for the violence that always came from men. Instead, he paused at the doorway. "Winona will stay with you. I hunt today, but will return before dark, if you need anything." He touched his chest, then pointed outside. "Call for Matto. Someone will find me." After he left, Clara stared at the space where he'd been. In her 22 years, no man had ever asked what she needed. Her father had barked orders until the day he died. Her brothers had taken his place without missing a beat. Henry had made his expectations brutally clear from the moment she'd arrived. But this Lakota chief had carried her to safety, tended her fever, and walked away without touching her or demanding anything in return. Winona settled beside the fire and picked up beadwork, her presence calm and undemanding. She hummed softly while she worked, occasionally glancing up to smile at Clara. When Clara finally reached for the bowl of broth, Winona nodded approvingly but didn't make a fuss. The soup tasted like nothing Clara had ever experienced, rich with herbs and meat, warming her from the inside out. As she sipped, strength slowly returned to her limbs. "Thank you," she whispered to Winona, who beamed and patted Clara's hand gently. Through the lodge opening, Clara could see other members of the tribe going about their daily tasks. Children played while mothers worked on various crafts. Men prepared weapons and horses. It felt like a real community, something she'd never experienced. When Mato returned, as promised before sunset, he carried fresh meat and something else. Wildflowers he'd gathered from the prairie. He placed them beside her sleeping furs without ceremony, as if bringing flowers to sick women was the most natural thing in the world. "You have more color," he observed, settling cross-legged by the fire. "This is good sign." Clara found her voice. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know my name." "Names can wait," he said simply. "Helping does not need reasons. You needed help. We give it." That night, as Clara drifted off in the warm lodge with wildflowers beside her head, she realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in her life, she felt protected rather than possessed. When Clara woke shivering in pre-dawn cold, she found another blanket had appeared silently during the night. The thick buffalo robe still held warmth as if it had been placed there moments before. She sat up carefully, her body still weak but no longer burning with fever. Mato knelt by the banked fire, coaxing flames back to life. He worked quietly, his movements economical and sure. When he noticed she was awake, he smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Good morning," he said in English, then repeated something in Lakota. "Mitakuye Oyasin." It means all my relations. We say this to greet each new day. "Mitakuye Oyasin," Clara repeated carefully. The words felt strange on her tongue, but somehow right. Very good. Mato's approval warmed her more than the growing fire. You learn quick. Over the following days, he taught her other words. Water was Emni, fire was Peta, and thank you was Pilamaya. Each lesson came naturally, woven into their daily interactions without pressure or condescension. When she stumbled over pronunciation, he simply repeated the word patiently until she got it right. Matto never asked about her past, but neither did he pretend she didn't have one. When sudden noises made her flinch, he would speak calmly until her breathing settled. When nightmares woke her crying, he would tend the fire and tell quiet stories until dawn. "In our way," he said one evening as they shared a meal Winona had prepared, We believe all creatures deserve chance to heal. Wounded bird does not fly until wing is strong. Wounded heart is same. Clara watched him across the fire, this man who spoke of wounded hearts with such matter-of-fact compassion. How do you know so much about wounded things? Matto was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Finally, he pulled back his sleeve to reveal a long, twisted scar running from wrist to elbow. Bear, when I was young warrior. Very proud, very stupid. Thought I could face him alone. What happened? Bear taught me that strength without wisdom is a dangerous thing. Also taught me that healing takes patience. He met her eyes directly. Some wounds of body, some wounds of spirit. Both need time and care. That night, as they sat by the fire after Winona had retired to her own lodge, Clara found herself laughing for the first time in months. Matto had been telling her about his nephew's attempts to catch a particularly clever rabbit, his dry humor bringing the story to life. "You have good laugh," he observed when her giggles subsided, "like water over stones." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I haven't laughed in a very long time. Then we must make sure you have reasons to laugh again." Something shifted between them in that moment. Clara realized she was no longer sitting tensely on the far side of the fire. Without conscious thought, she had gradually moved closer throughout the evening, drawn by his calm presence and gentle stories. For the first time since arriving, she wasn't counting the distance to the nearest exit. Instead, she was choosing to stay close to this man who treated her like something precious rather than something owned. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first deep breath she'd taken in years. The sound of approaching horses sent Clara diving behind Matto before she could think. Her body moved instinctively, seeking shelter against his broad back as hoofbeats thundered into the camp. Through her terror, she felt his hand reach back to touch her arm once, briefly, not restraining, just reassuring. "Easy," he murmured without turning around. "I am here." Henry Morrison rode into the camp, flanked by a sheriff and 2 deputies, their badges glinting in the afternoon sun. Clara's stomach dropped to her feet as her husband's cruel eyes swept the gathered Lakota until they found her cowering behind their chief. "There she is!" Henry pointed a dirty finger at Clara. "That's my wife, Sheriff. These savages kidnapped her." Sheriff Bradley, a weathered man who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, is this your husband?" Clara wanted to deny it, but lies would only make things worse. "Legally, yes. Then you need to come with us. A wife's place is with her husband." Matto stood slowly, his impressive height making the mounted men shift nervously. "She came to us hurt and afraid. We do not force anyone to leave who seeks protection." "The law's the law," Bradley said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Marriage is a legal contract. She belongs with her husband." "I belong to no one," Clara said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Henry's face flushed red. "You belong to me, woman. I paid good money for you, and I'll drag you back by your hair if I have to." The threat triggered something deep in Clara's chest, not just fear, but burning rage. She'd run 1,000 miles to escape one prison only to find another. She'd been bought and sold like livestock, passed between men who saw her as property rather than a person. But here, in this camp, she'd tasted something different: respect, kindness, choice. "No," she said, stepping out from behind Matto's protection. Her voice grew stronger with each word. "I won't go back to being beaten and used. I'd rather die on this prairie than spend another day as your wife. You don't have a choice." Henry started to dismount, reaching for his gun. Matto moved faster than Clara thought possible. Suddenly, Henry was looking down the length of a drawn bow, the arrow pointed directly at his heart. Around the camp, Other warriors had appeared with weapons ready, their faces impassive. "In our territory," Motto said calmly, "women choose their own path. You will respect this choice." Sheriff Bradley held up his hands. "Now hold on. Nobody needs to die here. Ma'am, if you're claiming abuse—" "Look at her face," Motto interrupted. "Look at bruises on her arms. This man struck her the day she arrived. We have laws too, Sheriff. Laws that protect wounded from those who would hurt them." Clara touched her cheek where the bruise had faded to yellow-green. In her world, a husband's right to discipline his wife was rarely questioned. But these people saw her bruises as evidence of crime rather than marital correction. "The territorial governor has treaties with Chief Mato's tribe," another voice said. A well-dressed man rode up, clearly someone important. "This land falls under tribal jurisdiction. If the woman claims sanctuary, it's their right to grant it." Henry's face twisted with fury, but even he could see he was outnumbered. "This ain't over. You're my wife, Clara, and I'll find a way to get you back." "Try," Mato said simply, his bow still drawn. "We will be waiting." As the white men rode away, Clara realized she was shaking, not with fear, but with the intoxicating rush of standing up for herself. For the first time in her life, she'd said no to a man and lived to tell about it. More importantly, she hadn't faced the consequences alone. Clara took Mato's scarred hand in both of hers and finally understood what tenderness meant. They sat beside the stream where his warriors had found her weeks ago, watching evening stars emerge in the vast prairie sky. The bruises on her face had long since faded, but the healing went deeper than her skin. "Your husband will not return," Mato said quietly. "The territorial governor made his position clear. You are under our protection as long as you wish it. And if I wish it forever?" He turned to study her face in the starlight, his dark eyes serious. "Forever is long time, Clara. You have seen only small piece of our life. Winter is coming. Life will be harder, different from world you know." She'd been thinking about this for days, ever since Henry's failed attempt to reclaim her. The other women of the tribe had welcomed her gradually, teaching her to work hides and gather medicine plants. Children had stopped staring and started including her in their games. She'd found a place here, a purpose beyond simply surviving from one day to the next. "I've spent my whole life in the wrong world," she said softly. "With my father, with my brothers, in that terrible marriage, I was always trying to become smaller, quieter, less troublesome. Here, I feel like I can breathe." Mato's thumb traced gently across her knuckles. Even that small touch would have terrified her a month ago. Now it sent warmth spreading through her chest. "There is something you should know," he said. "I have been married before. My wife died in winter sickness 3 years past. I have grieved her properly, but my heart it learns to beat again when I see you laugh." Clara's breath caught. She'd wondered about his past, about why such a strong and gentle man lived alone. "I'm honored that you would share that with me. I share because I want no secrets between us if you choose to stay, if you choose me." The weight of the decision settled over her, but it didn't feel heavy. For once in her life, she was being offered a real choice. Not an arrangement made by others, not a transaction disguised as marriage, but genuine partnership built on respect and growing love. "I'm broken," she whispered. "I have nightmares. I flinch at sudden movements. I don't know if I'll ever be the kind of wife you deserve." Mato lifted their joined hands to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her fingers. "We are all broken in some way, but broken things can heal stronger than before, yes? Like bone that breaks and grows back harder, you make it sound possible. With patience, all things possible. With love, healing comes easier." Clara looked into his eyes and saw her future, not the terrified scrambling for survival she'd known. but something beautiful and chosen and free. She leaned forward and kissed him softly, tasting freedom on his lips. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I choose you," she whispered. "I choose this life, this love, this healing. I choose all of it." Mato's smile could have lit the entire prairie. "Then we will build something beautiful together." Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, while beside the stream, two wounded hearts learned to beat as one. Clara felt the last of her fear drain away, replaced by something she'd never dared hope for, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Clara woke not to fear, but to Mato's quiet morning song drifting through the lodge walls. She placed her hand on her rounded belly, feeling their child move within her like a promise of hope made manifest. Outside, spring had transformed the prairie into an ocean of wildflowers that stretched beyond the horizon. The day was their wedding day. Winona bustled into the lodge carrying the dress they'd spent weeks creating together, soft white doeskin decorated with intricate beadwork that told the story of Clara's journey from darkness into light. Each tiny bead had been placed with prayers and blessings from the women who'd become her sisters. "Today you become our daughter truly," Winona said in the mixture of English and Lakota they used between them now. Clara understood both languages fluently. But more importantly, she understood the love behind the words. As Winona helped her dress, Clara marveled at the transformation. The terrified woman who'd collapsed by this very stream had been replaced by someone strong and sure of her place in the world. Her hands, once soft from idle wealthy life, now bore calluses from useful work. Her face, once pinched with constant fear, now glowed with contentment and anticipation. The ceremony blended both traditions beautifully. Clara wore the Lakota dress but carried wildflowers traditional to her own upbringing. Mato appeared in his finest regalia alongside a simple gold band he'd traded for at the fort, a symbol of promise that bridged their two worlds. As they spoke their vows beside the stream where their story began, Clara saw faces in the gathering crowd that told their own tales. Young Running Deer, who'd been suspicious of the white woman at first, now smiled warmly and held her own baby close. Old Grandfather Chasky nodded approval as Mato promised to honor Clara's strength as well as protect her gentleness. "You came to us broken," Mato said during his vows, "but you were never truly broken. Only wounded. Today I promise to tend those wounds with patience, to celebrate your healing with joy, and to love all of you, warrior and women, fierce and tender." Clara's vows came from the deepest part of her heart. "You taught me that love doesn't take strength away, it gives strength freely. You showed me that being cherished doesn't make me weak. I promise to love you with all the courage you've helped me find." When they kissed to seal their union, the baby kicked hard enough to make Clara gasp and laugh. Mato's hand joined hers on their growing child, his eyes bright with tears of pure happiness. That evening, as the celebration continued around them, Clara found herself helping young Mary Morrison, another mail-order bride who'd recently escaped her own nightmare and sought sanctuary with the tribe. The girl was barely 18. Terrified and suspicious of every kindness. "Does it really get easier?" Mary whispered as Clara sat beside her offering food. Clara smiled and touched her belly where their child moved peacefully. "Better than easier. It becomes beautiful. You'll see." As the stars emerged overhead, Clara looked around at the faces lit by firelight. Her husband, her adopted family, her community of choice rather than birth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was perfect in its wholeness. She'd run from one man's cruelty into another man's tenderness, and in doing so had discovered the difference between being owned and being loved. Their child would grow up knowing that difference from the very beginning, raised by parents who chose each other freely and daily renewed that choice with every act of care. The prairie wind carried the scent of sage and new grass, whispering promises of seasons yet to come. Clara closed her eyes and listened to her husband's laughter mixing with the voices of their people, knowing she was finally, truly home.